Hey, thanks everybody for joining us on today's webinar. Today we're going to be working with rethinking your job search, and we have an excellent panel with us today. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Nikki and Kirsty from McLaren Recruitment, who are going to take us through a bit of an intro, and then we'll kick into things.
Oh, thank you, Craig. Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar. Just a couple of housekeeping things first. If you could please keep your cameras and microphones turned off. If you have questions throughout, please feel free to pop them in the chat throughout today's session, and we will get to those at a Q&A at the end. I'm Kirsty McLaren. Next to me is Nikki Walshaw. We run recruitment agency McLaren Recruitment. We specialise in recruitment at all levels, from admin to chief executive and everything in between. We work across all sectors, but are particularly well known in the not-for-profit NGO membership space. Joining us today, we have Craig McAlpine, Kyla Hindle, Gordon Holmes and Wendy McPhail from My Career Brand. Since 2011, My Career Brand has been delivering career coaching, including career transition and outplacement, career direction, onboarding, CV writing, LinkedIn and job search strategy. Craig, Kyla, Gordon and Wendy combine decades of expertise with the latest in AI and contemporary research to provide practical, personalised coaching. They're engaged by both employers and individuals here in New Zealand and overseas, with most of their clients coming through referrals, which is a real testament to their success in delivering great outcomes.
And as you know, today's webinar is about uncovering smarter, more strategic ways to secure your next role. So we're going to explore permanent, contract and emerging career paths that most candidates overlook. And we're going to share clear, practical advice to help you move forwards with confidence and momentum. So first of all, we're going to run through a brief job market update, and then following on from that, we'll talk about how to take a more strategic approach to your decisions and your job search activity. Then we're going to look at how to determine your best next move, and then how to shift the dial in interviews and create stronger traction, followed by taking a look at whether you should hold out for a permanent role or explore contract or temp work or consider an entirely different pathway. And then finally, we'll go through the questions that have come through as we're speaking with a Q&A session. But before we hand over to My Career Brand, I'd like to just provide a brief job market update. The headline is essentially this: the market is continuing to improve, but employers do remain selective. So looking at SEEK's latest employment report, it's showing that job ads increased just over 13% year on year in April, and that is continuing the strongest period of growth in the New Zealand job market that was seen in the last 3 years, which is really great. Job ads also rose 0.8% month on month, which shows hiring activity is continuing to build, but steadily rather than through spikes or short-term increases and then dropping again. At the same time, competition for roles remains significant. So while there are more opportunities available than there were a year ago, there are still large numbers of candidates actively seeking jobs. The good news, though, is that applications per job ad have now fallen for several consecutive months, including a further 1.6% decline in the latest reporting period from SEEK. So what that's all telling us really is that while competition remains strong, it is easing from the record levels experienced in 2024 and early 2025. So looking better.
Yeah, and the recovery, it's also becoming more broad-based. So most industries are now recording annual growth in advertised vacancies, and regions across New Zealand are seeing improved hiring demand. Wellington continues to show signs of recovery after a particularly challenging period, while industries such as construction, industrial, trades and logistics have experienced some of the strongest growth. That said, as Nikki said, many employers remain cautious. Economic conditions have improved compared with a year ago, but organisations are still being careful about committing to permanent headcount growth. We continue to see businesses taking longer to make hiring decisions, undertaking more thorough recruitment processes, and being highly targeted about the skills and experience that they're looking for. So for job seekers, it means standing out matters more than ever. A clear value proposition, a targeted approach, and a strong professional brand remain critical to securing the right opportunity. And talking to this is the team at My Career Brand. So we'll hand it over to you guys.
Wendy. Is Wendy in there?
There we are. That helps,
Yeah,
doesn't it?
you're
We
on.
have the mic on. Thank you, Nikki and Kirsty. I think the great news there is that there is the reinforcement that there are jobs out there. Today, this is all about how do we go about getting them and how do we stand out from the crowd, which is at My Career Brand something that we work really hard on with our clients. So we're suggesting that you first and foremost take a bit of a strategic view to this. And some of these thoughts and points might be a little bit counterintuitive to how you're currently thinking if you're in the market, but we suggest that you stop. First and foremost, businesses are really good, or successful businesses are really good at planning, considering different market approaches and changes. And we really recommend that you stop and apply some of that thinking to your own lives. One of the questions that I ask people very simply is, what do you want to be when you grow up? And the reason I ask that is because often people haven't stopped to think, I'm a fabulous leader of people, or I'm a technical expert in my business or my sector, or I really, really want to run something like a rocket lab in the future. So if you've got that view, you've got that dream, it's much easier to reach out and to put some focus around it when you're actually looking at the job market. So we want to arm you with a vision or a plan. And if you've got an inkling that something's changing in your workplace, or you know that you want to change your job, or you're surprised one day when your job actually does come to an end, we suggest that you really start and think about this plan. Now, it might be documented words, it might be bullet pointed, it might be online, it might be on a piece of paper, it might be an image. I was really fortunate when I was 25. I was shut in a room and I was given a pile of magazines and told to create a collage of my life, my work life, what I wanted to achieve and how I might go about it. What I didn't know, it was actually the step in being employed for a role that I'd gone to actually investigate. So it did have a good outcome. I've framed that. It's still in my office today. Just recently, someone was around it visiting us and they had a nephew with them, late teens, and he was telling us about a dream that he has. And my question to him was, well, how are you going to enact that? And he said, I'll show you. And he had a vision board that he'd created, and he's well on the pathway to actually putting the framework and the pieces in place that are going to help him get there. Long road, but I have no doubt that he knows the steps that he has to put in place. So I know that you might have some immediate needs when it comes to jobs. However, we do suggest that that pause and that stop is going to help you make the right choices on the way through. When it comes to considering your options, the second bullet point here is, this is where I get a read on people when they come to us at My Career Brand. Have you had that mad flurry of job applications without success, either not hearing back from recruiters or companies, not getting interviews, or are you one of those people who've just not done anything because you don't know where to start? And we also speak to a lot of people that are in the middle. They've tested the water with one or two applications, haven't been successful, not quite sure what to do. And that's where we also suggest when you come to us, stop. And the question I ask here is, how long do you want to work or continue to work in paid work? Because we get people coming to us who may be a year or 18 months away from retirement. The type of work they want to look at is probably not your long-term permanent role, and maybe temp work or contract work will suit them more effectively than the person who wants to work 10, 20, 30 years and actually goes, well, I need a pathway. I need to know the steps I want to put in place in order to get me into the role that I really want to have. And this actually parallels what organisations do. It's a living document. This collateral that we create should actually be living. It should change as we go through our lives. So how do we apply the thinking? First of all, we've stopped. We've thought about where we want to be. Then we started to think about what's the plan, what that might look like. What we suggest then is you act just like an organisation. You research. Okay, what are the options available? Seeker is not the only job board available, but also have really wide and diverse conversations. We really recommend a starting point at My Career Brand being in a Gallup Strengths Assessment so that you can knowledgeably talk to employers or recruiters about what you're really good at, where your talents lie, and then help create that best collateral. You can pull it all together. You've got language that you can use when you're actually in an interview. And that actually helps us form the picture, is that if you're sitting there at the moment, knowing you're going to need to look for a role or are looking for a role, diversify that view, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit more depth with Gordon in a minute, but, are these things contract roles? Are they temporary roles? Are they fractional roles? Different roles in different places? Are they permanent roles? I have someone at the moment who started off with a side hustle while he was waiting on a very long garden leave period, and that side hustle has actually become a permanent job. So it's that's not where he'd intended to actually for it to be, but that's how it's evolved. While we're all in different places, I think it's also really important to know that we are far more likely to achieve things if we write these things down. So hence the vision, the plan, the picture, the process, get the thinking straight, and then the rest will actually flow. So Gordon, let's lead us into how we might go about this.
Thanks, Wendy. Once you've got your strategic plan prepared, you need to be very clear on what's your next ideal role. And if you're not clear, there's a problem, because that will come through to recruiters and hiring managers when you're talking to them, either explicitly or implicitly. So we would recommend, before going to market, having clarity about that next role. And we help a lot of people with career direction support. And there are two particular approaches that we take. Most people go through the plan and implement approach, and some go through the test and learn approach, which is more about career reinvention. So if you go through the plan and implement approach, which most of our clients do, then we look at the past initially and use several different lenses to get insights and reflections that help inform decisions going forward. We look at the present to see what goals and options people have, and then we go to the future and might do some career research to narrow down a preferred career direction. And with both methodologies, the outcome is that people can articulate their ideal next role. And for most people, that next role will be permanent employment. 76% of the webinar participants said that they are seeking a permanent role. And whilst Nikki referenced job ads being up 13% year on year, landing a new role is still isn't easy. And 50 to 60% of participants on the webinar have said that it's very competitive out there and it's a tough market when you're applying for jobs. So if you're currently in a job search and it isn't delivering for you, then you might like to rethink your approach. If you're not getting momentum, then pushing harder might not get you better results. So you might be better to change how you're showing up to the market. And this could be about exploring broadening options. Next slide, thanks. Yeah. There's a whole range of options there on the screen, and some of them people typically overlook. But we would encourage you, if you're having challenges with your job search, to broaden which options you might explore. And some of them, like contracting and temping, are often misunderstood and underestimated for their ability to help you secure a permanent role. And whilst these types of employment might not be for everyone, they can be an entry point serving multiple purposes to showcase the relevance of what you've got to offer to prospective employers. And there's a number of benefits of doing this. If you take a contract or temping role, for example, still with the aim to have a permanent role, then what you're doing is demonstrating to the organisation you're working with your capability, and its capability in the context of the relevant types of jobs that you're wanting to secure permanently. It's also replacing your potential. What you have on your CV purports what your potential is, but the better way to showcase your skills and capabilities and experience is to perform that actually in a job, and that provides evidence to employers of the capabilities you say that you have. And performing these sorts of interim roles also shortens the gap between conversations and hiring decisions. And perhaps most importantly, a really significant number of temporary and contract positions become permanent with the organisations that people are working with on an interim basis. So it can lead to permanent employment. And Craig summarises these benefits really nicely by the term evidence of capability in motion. So you're actually showcasing your skills and your experience in the workplace. And for employers, there's some really good benefits too. It increases their visibility of you, it reduces the risk, and it increases their decision-making speed. And what we've found at My Career Brand is that people that have broadened their career options, this has played out really well for them, for a number of our clients. For example, I have a client who's secured their dream job through taking a fixed term role. So they were seeking permanent employment, but a fixed term role came up, and they've secured it, and it's a multi-year fixed term role, so they've secured it. Another of our clients has secured a role that they haven't ever performed the job title before, and what had happened is they'd narrowed down their search to too narrow a field instead of looking at the outcomes and capabilities that they had to deliver. And when they started to broaden what they could bring, then the opportunities increased for them. So if you do consider some of these broader career options, it has implications for how you interview and show up for these roles. And Kyla's going to help us talk through that for candidates.
Thank you, Gordon. So we've heard from Wendy about the importance of taking a strategic approach to what's next. And now we've heard from Gordon on some ways in which you can do that and the variety of options which could be available to you as a job seeker. The interview is where the rubber hits the road. The responsibility for creating a compelling story regarding your motivation, your skills, and your attributes really lies with you as the job seeker. And it's often where it all goes wrong, and it can do so in a range of ways. You know, we see people being too chatty, we see people being too quiet. But for example, if you are in the mix for a contracting opportunity and you're going along for an interview for a contracting opportunity, it's up to you to make it really easy for the recruiter to believe that you're actually choosing this option of contracting or temping or fractional work, rather than being forced into it by circumstance. So there's a few things to think about when it comes down to this. And the first is actually explaining why you're interested in the role, which typically will be the first question that you'll be asked when you get into an interview. It's a really important question because it talks to your motivation, and it allows you to differentiate yourself from other applicants that might have really similar experience to you. If I think back to when I was recruiting, when I would ask somebody this question, if they could give me an answer that talked about being excited by the industry that my company sat in, being excited by working for the company that I was hiring for, and being excited about doing the day-to-day tasks that the role involved, I'd be really interested in wanting to hear more from them, and they would hook me in at that point. If you're in the mix for a contracting role, you need to add in to that answer the fact that, you know, why contracting appeals to you. The next thing to think about is actually how your skills and experience position you for this role. So at My Career Brand, we use a tool called the Role Alignment and Capability Matrix, which is a tool that allows you to identify the key selection criteria for the role that you're applying for, and then select the best examples from your career to date that demonstrate your capability to deliver against that selection criteria. So it allows you to go into an interview with your best examples at the ready, rather than, you know, decades of career experience spinning around in your brain. If you're in the mix for a contracting role, going in as a contractor, you will typically be required to really hit the ground running, to add value quickly. You're probably going to land in an under-resourced, sticky situation, potentially with a lack of information, having to problem solve, having to collaborate really quickly, having to establish trust and establish relationships really quickly. So when you're going through and you're choosing your stories, if you're interviewing for a contracting role, you want to make sure that you're selecting stories that demonstrate your ability to really operate in this way. Once we've selected our stories, there is a methodology. If you've been on previous webinars of ours, you will have heard me talk about the CAR methodology, or you might be familiar with STAR. This structure allows us to bring the right level of detail and focus to our answers and stops us going off track or getting lost in our stories. And really help us to give the interviewer what they need to be confident that you're the right fit for the role. The last thing to think about is your strengths. So reflecting on our strengths can be really powerful for a contracting role. If something comes naturally to you, then you'll really gravitate towards it and you're going to thrive with those tasks. If I think about myself, my own strengths are relationship building and executing. So I would make sure that this was really evident in the answer that I'd selected, and I'd be referencing my strengths throughout the interview as well. Wendy mentioned earlier on that we use Clifton or Gallup Strength Finder in a lot of our programs at My Career Brand, and it's about $100 for the assessment, and you get some really awesome reporting alongside that, which will help you to be really targeted and really focused on what lights your fire when you get into an interview. So they are a few things to be thinking about. Now we will move into Q&A.
Great. Okay. Hey, thanks everybody for the questions that we've got so far. If you've actually got any more, just keep on firing them into chat and we'll move through those. So some really useful insights there from our panel. Just the first question that I have here is the lower number of applicants for jobs possibly linked to applicants moving offshore? I'm going to throw that one over to Nikki and Kirsty, because I think you'd probably be the best place to answer that and what you're seeing in the market there.
It's hard to draw direct correlations. There are definitely still large numbers of people. I mean, you look at the net migration stats, and there are still huge numbers, although it has slowed down since numbers 2 years ago, but there are still huge numbers of people moving offshore. But whether you can directly say that the lower number of applicants per jobs is related to that, I don't know. I don't know. You could hazard a guess. There's a relationship there, but yeah, you'd have to research it to be sure on that. Yeah,
it seems to be front of mind, doesn't it, for everybody? We get it a lot in the media. Oh, there's all these people going offshore, and so on. So it's an interesting one to have a think about. It was interesting, I think, that we do seem to have, I think there was a lower number of applicants. Maybe people are starting to get a bit more choosy. I mean, it could mean a whole raft of things, couldn't it, in terms of the economy? Could mean actually if people are seeing or being a little bit nervous in the economy, that they're holding on to the job they've got, sometimes better the devil you know than devil you don't, as you say. I think Nikki and Kirsty, it's quite a broad one, that one.
I was just going to say, in the numbers, the decrease in applications per job ad is still not huge. It is trending down, but we're still talking quite small percentages. And if we look at the jobs that we're recruiting currently, there are still, we are getting hundreds of applications still, maybe not 200, but 80, 90, 100 plus applications. So we're not talking 20, 30 applications now. It's small decreases.
I think that sort of stands out to, one of the key things that we work on at my career brand. And I know Wendy and Kyla and Gordon will agree with me here, is what's your point of difference? What are you actually bringing to the table that's going to make you stand out? And Wendy touched on it, Kyla touched on it, Gordon touched on it as well. Actually know your story and why you're actually applying for the role, rather than it just being a transactional one. Okay, so another question here was, what is a fractional role? And I'm going to throw that back to Gordon, because Gordon is the one that talked about fractional. So explain the fractional, difference between fractional, contract, temping, and so on, Gordon, and portfolio.
Okay, fractional work is a term that's arrived from offshore reasonably recently, and it typically references people in executive roles or senior specialist roles working for multiple organisations at the same time. So they might do 2 weeks with 2 days a week with organisation A, performing one role, and then performing the same type of role, might be chief marketing officer, something like that, with another organisation, say 2 days a week, but different days. So that's an example of fractional work where it's an ongoing permanent work, but it's only part of a week, so a fraction of a job. It appeals to organisations where they want the high level of expertise, but either don't require it 5 days a week or perhaps can't afford it 5 days a week. So that's fractional work. Portfolio work is where people perform a number of paid part-time roles, and the roles that they perform could be quite different. So, for example, I do a portfolio career. The majority of my time is spent coaching, which I absolutely love doing, but I also have a second role, which is around superannuation and governance. So quite a different field. So that's an example of a portfolio career. Temping is usually very short term. It can be day by day or week by week. And then contracting is to do usually with projects, see a project through. And then fixed term work is where there's a temporary need at the outset for the work, and it's not a permanent need at the end of that work. So typically a project, which could be a couple of months or it could be a multi-year if it's, say, a large infrastructure build. And there can be crossovers between all of these different categories of employment.
Great, thank you for that. Another question we have here, and I'm going to get Kyla to answer this one. Primed for this. Do you have any tips for online interviews? What would you suggest people prepare for, and just any tips in general?
Okay, so I think doing all the preparation that I talked about when I was in the slides, when we were going through the slides. So choosing your examples that demonstrate your skills and experience, thinking about why you're interested in the role, thinking about your strengths, etc. Online interviews are a little bit different because you haven't sort of got that whole body language piece. I think the first thing to think about is to make sure that your setup is good, so that your camera is at eye level and, you know, they're not looking, the other interviewers aren't looking straight up your nose. So making sure that the camera is at eye level, making sure that you've got your background, you know, whether it's a green screen like I've got or just your background blurred, but nothing too busy in the background behind you. And I am a terrible example of this, but your hands, and I talk with my hands horrendously, and I don't seem to be able to string a sentence together without doing this, but you've kind of got to be aware of that when you are talking on a screen, because as you can see now, my hands look enormous and they kind of dominate the screen and can be quite distracting. Anything I've missed?
I think one of the things when you're online is you don't get the same opportunity for icebreakers, building rapport, small talk that you might get in an in-person interview while you're sort of coming into the room together perhaps, or you're going in and sitting down and getting yourself all organised. It does have a tendency to go straight into the formal aspects. So I think trying to build some rapport with your interviewer to start with, maybe ask a question, and yeah, I guess it's trying to show your personality and break that ice in the best way you can, knowing that you don't have some of the in-person ways of going about it that you might do with a face-to-face interview. So you have to be able to build that rapport quite quickly, I think. Yeah.
I think the other thing, Kyla, and you wrote a post about this, Plan B. You know, what happens when your technology goes down or the camera's not working? So, you know, that sort of thing is really important. Like, set it up with the recruiter or the hiring manager. Hey, you know, this is what we'll resort to, or how would you like to resort to a plan B? Would it be on our mobiles? Is that okay? Can we FaceTime? Can we do whatever? You know, so you don't want to lose that opportunity. Right. Okay. One here for you, Wendy. And as a very experienced hiring manager yourself, what would about providing referees? What if you don't want your last manager as a referee?
So that's a very good question. It's also a very common question. I think it's the quality of the referees. So there's also a really important step here around, I think a lot of people don't think this through as they go through their work life. And no matter what the instance and the situation is, when you come out of an organisation or move on from organisation, you want to make sure that you've maintained and really looked after the relationships that are important to you. So you never know when you're going to need them. I think that's what, you know, and I would speak from experience on that one. It is very common not to use your current employer or maybe your past employer for many different reasons. You might not want them to know that you're looking for a job. You didn't have such a great relationship with them. You can't rely on what they're going to say. I would try and recommend or find someone in that organisation where you worked that they could talk to. Often recruiters, and Nikki and Kirsty can talk to this as well, but they're quite often talking to perhaps someone, a colleague, sometimes even your subordinates that have worked for you. But also if you've got 2 or 3 really good referees from previous roles. So you need 2 or 3. It doesn't always have to be, and certainly as a recruiter, it's never really worried me that the immediate job role hasn't been there, as long as I got a really good read on the person. So, and I would, sometimes people are quite honest and they'll go, listen, I don't really have a, you know, someone that you can talk to. And I think about this even for myself. In an organisation that I worked with, and if I apply for things like board roles and things today, I can't use that organisation because unfortunately both the chair, the founder of the business, and one other have all passed away. So which is a little unfortunate, but the reality is I'm getting down to people who I probably wouldn't rely on saying the right thing at the level that I'm at. So Kirsty, Nikki, you might have some other thoughts on this.
Yeah, I recently had a candidate who has just come out of a redundancy situation, and they didn't want to use their most recent manager as their referee. We had a really open and frank conversation about it, and I think the manager was quite a difficult personality, but what we did do was speak with so she reported to the chief executive. We did a reference with a peer. So that peer was able to talk to, having seen this person's work day to day, but also make a bit of commentary around, you know, why do you think we might not be speaking directly with the chief executive, and just get a little bit of context around sort of that personality situation as well. We didn't want to put this candidate in a position where they felt psychologically unsafe that we were speaking with someone that they weren't comfortable with, but it was important that we got a little bit more context around that for the employer that she was going into, and did secure the role with, that they were comfortable, because she'd been there for 6 years or maybe even more. So talking to that recency of experience.
Great. Here's another one for you, actually, Nikki and Kirsty as well. Nice to go into this one. Is, as a skilled migrant, how can I get the first New Zealand work experience? So do you have experience? How would you recommend people do as a recruiter?
Yeah, I think it's about looking and reflecting on the experience that you have from overseas and looking at where and how that translates to New Zealand opportunities, and then being able to tell that compelling message, as Kayla was saying, about what you've done, what skills and experience you have, and how that really strongly aligns with the opportunities that you're applying for. So making sure that you're targeting your approach and that it is in line with your previous work experience, but acknowledging that sometimes you do need to make a bit of a sideways step to a job that may be not equivalent to what you've been doing overseas to get your foot in the door. Sometimes that's necessary. But I think it's all about that compelling message and what you can bring to the organisation from the experience and skills that you've gained overseas, really. And how,
Great. Okay, here's one for you, Gordon. So what would you recommend with your clients would be the number of pages on their CV?
It obviously depends on the amount of career experience people have had. So typically helping clients, it would be somewhere between 3 to 5 pages in length. I would never go beyond 5 pages. And at some levels, people are also invited to provide a short CV as well. So it might be a 1-page or a 2-pager that often occurs at the executive level, but those people would still have a longer one as well. But I wouldn't recommend beyond 5 pages as the maximum.
Great. Yeah. Kirsty and Nikki, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Another one for Kyla, because you talked about strengths, and just as a point of interest, both Wendy and Kyla are our strengths coaches at My Career Brand. So if you do want to undertake in strengths and assessment, get in touch with either Kyla or Wendy. Kyla, can you, Wendy or Kyla? Can you actually explain the Gallup-Clifton strengths just in a little bit more detail, the difference between a skill and a strength and where they can find that? I think they can go to our website. Well, I know they can go to our website and read more about it, but if you could just give a little bit more elaboration on what that difference is between strengths and skills.
Yeah, definitely. So we use the tool that we use is a tool called Gallup. The provider is Gallup, and the tool is Strength Finder. And essentially what that tool does is it lists out, you complete an assessment, it lists out 34 different talent themes, and it puts them that sit across a range of different domain areas. So whether that's relationship building, executing, influencing, or strategic thinking. Gallup's perspective is that these are talents that we're kind of born with. So our strengths are things that are inherent within us. We're born with them and we take them through our lives. And as we apply them, they can become a skill, but they're not always a skill. There's sort of a bit of a difference between skills that you have acquired through learning and experience. The process of going through and completing some strengths coaching can just help you to be really clear on the things that light your fire, and consequently often the things that you're going to do really well, and help you to link your career experience to those strengths, which allows you to go to market with a really compelling story about what you love to do and some evidence of when you've applied those themes. I could talk about this for a really long time, but in the interest of not taking control, I'll stop there.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, it's a really important differentiation between the two. Hey, there's a really interesting topic going around in the market at the moment is AI and how it's actually impacting job applicants. And I know there's a lot of angst out there on both sides, employers, recruiters, and job applicants as well, as the role that AI is actually playing. Nikki and Kirsty, I wonder if you could provide us with a little bit of insight into what AI role AI actually plays in terms of screening applicants in general, from what you've heard in the market, and as well as what you do. There's a couple of questions around that and how it's actually applied for screening. Nikki and Kirsty.
The common understanding of what AI is used for in screening comes down to keywords. I'll preface that by saying we don't use it, so I can only comment on what we hear. Every application that comes through McLaren is viewed with human eyes, and we still undertake our screening and shortlisting personally. But you hear about ATS friendly. What ATS stands for is Applicant Tracking System. That is what we use to track all of our applications and the stages that they get to. The premise is that AI is using keywords that the recruiter or hiring manager has put into the system that are the key skills and experience that we're looking for this role. So as an example, say we're looking for a social worker. We will have the word social worker in there. We might want them to come from an NGO background, so we might have NGO. So looking for the words that we put in the advertising and in the position description to essentially be mirrored in your application. Obviously wanting you to have those skills and experience, don't just put them in there if you don't. But the AI is picking up from your cover letter and your CV whether you have these keywords in there. So it is recommended that you tailor your application, your CV and your cover letter to reflect the skills and experience that the recruiter or hiring manager is looking for in their job advertisement and position description.
Great, thanks for that. I'd also like to throw in there that I think the perception of the role that AI plays is actually larger than what it actually is. There are a lot of, if we look at most recruiters in New Zealand, from my own research in the market, they are actually looking at the CVs and the cover letters as they come in, and some recruiters are very quick to respond, and that creates the perception, oh, I must have been screened out immediately or within 5 minutes. That's not necessarily true. I know some organizations, the very large organizations that are recruiting for high volume roles, will often use what we call tomahawk questions or screening questions that would discount people. So for example, if you're required to be in country, okay, then relying on the person actually saying that what they are actually either in country or out of country, that can sometimes screen people out. But yeah, okay, so sort of a nice segue into the next one. And Wendy, I wonder if you could answer this one, please. Any tips for creating an impactful cover letter? Does including some personal background help or hinder, or is it purely subjective to the reader? What's your thoughts about cover letters? Oh, you're on mute, Wendy.
Right, that's better. I would say that a good cover letter is invaluable because it brings with it some of your personality. However, the mistake that I often see are very long cover letters of 2 or 3 pages, written with long, lengthy paragraphs. And, we're hearing and we keep hearing that there's something like, a 6-minute browse across the first page of a 6-second browse across the first page of your CV and cover letter inclusive. So you really need that to stand out. 3 parts are critical with that cover letter. The first is you would want to reference, and this is very hard to do today, I appreciate this, but if you can actually speak to someone before applying for the role in the organisation you're applying for, without obviously any conflicts. But it was always good to reference, if there's a name or a number there, take the opportunity to call someone and to actually reference that in your opening comment of the cover letter. You're really wanting to capture what it is the organisation's looking to achieve by employing you. I'm a great advocate for using bullet points and I probably speak from experience about reading thousands of these over the years, is that I definitely scan, I skim read, so I actually scan through the centre of the page. So the first paragraph is going to actually highlight, probably in 3 or 4 bullet points, what's the organisation looking for. Now, this is not just parroting something that's on a job advertisement. This should actually be, maybe you've actually been able to research and find out that they're wanting this new role created because they're actually looking to enter into a new offshore market, or, you know, you're wanting to actually see if you can capture a little bit of gold. You know, you've researched what's happening to them in the marketplace. You've done some Google and chat searches just to see what's happening. Second piece to that CV is actually about you. Knowing what it is the organisation wants to actually achieve, this is where you get to speak to you. It's just like, you know, by employing me in this role, these are the talents and skills that I can actually bring and hit the ground running with. And so you're really wanting to leverage up those key elements of what it is you're bringing to the table. The third paragraph is your close and your call to action. It's like, please find attached my CV. I look forward to hearing from you. And here is my URL link to my LinkedIn. You know, and you're obviously going to end it nicely, but no more than a page, and not packed pages. I always recommend at least 1.15 spacing, so there's white space and it's easy to read. The busier it is, the less likely it is someone's going to read it.
Yeah, that's great. I think also using a cover letter can sometimes be seen as demonstrating your commitment to applying for the role, and you're not the habitual applicant. You know, and you're just pushing apply now, apply now, apply now. You've put some thought into it, which is a nice segue. And I know we're right on time. We've got a couple more questions. If people want to hang about, happy to answer them. So we've got the cover letter. In terms of the using AI in their job applications, or using AI for job applications, Gordon, perhaps you could answer this one. When you're working with your clients, what is your recommendation in terms of using AI for the job search process and their applications?
Sure. So over the last year or two, we've seen increased use of AI through our career coaching. But what we need to make sure is that our unique language and style comes through in the AI. We've heard from many recruiters saying that they've seen exactly the same cover letters coming through that have been written through AI, and similar CVs. So that's a concern. There is an important place for AI. We always encourage people to do lots of research about the roles, as Wendy alluded to, before putting in their job application. So AI can be used to help with the research, and it can be used for some drafts, but it should then be edited using your plain English and your style of language, and that if there was any software put across it to see the percentage of AI created content in what you've written, that it would be less than 15%. So make sure what you use for your cover letter and your CV is in plain English and reflects your language and style, but you can certainly use AI as a helpful input tool.
Yeah, often when I'm working with my clients, I often say to them, when you're putting in your context and command into AI, what you can say is create content that is least AI detectable. And what it does is it keeps that in mind. And I've used other AI tools completely separate to the previous tool that I've used to run an AI detection test on it. And that does work as well. So it's a useful thing to do, but generally, yeah, please make it in your tone. Look, one more question just to close off, and I'm going to direct this one at Nikki and Kirsty. Do you know if it's common practice for recruiters and organisation to keep track of a record of a person's past applications? Does the fact that someone has applied several times unsuccessfully influence recruiters to disregard their new application? How do you approach the habitual applicant?
Yeah, it is commonplace for recruiters and organisations to track previous applications unless the candidate has requested under the Privacy Act that their details be removed. And for every application that we receive, we let candidates know that they're able to do that. But if they choose not to, then yes, the record of their applications going back as long as the person's applicant tracking system goes back, we do have records of that. But it doesn't impact the assessment of suitability for the role, certainly not for us. Each application is considered for the role they've applied for on its merits. However, there are candidates in our database that have applied for everything from chief executive to receptionist to sales manager to finance manager and everything in between. And when you see applications from one person coming through for such a wide range of roles at such different levels, that certainly does raise the question as to their suitability and genuine targetedness for the role that they're applying for. So that doesn't reflect particularly well, but we wouldn't, if we saw that somebody had applied for 3 or 4 marketing roles in the last year and they're a marketer, then great. That just shows that they're actively targeting roles that they've got skills and experience for, and that's no problem at all. So it's about the relevantness and targetedness of the application, I think, more so. Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much for that. With that, we're going to wrap up today. Thank you so much to everybody who has attended. We know we've taken time out of your day. Just on the last slide there, you can see the coaches at My Career Brand. You can scan the QR code and that will open up your email, send us an email. If that doesn't work for you, well, by all means, visit mycareerbrand.net or mclaren.co.nz for recruitment. And don't forget about our resources and blog pages as well. So for McLaren, you can see that at mclaren.co.nz/blog. Some great tips in there that they've shared. And for us, go to great resources on our website, mycareerbrand.net. You'll also find the coach profiles on there. Highly encourage you, if you are thinking about looking for a new role or perhaps looking at the career direction that you might take, whether it be permanent, temp, contracting, fractional, all those ones that Gordon talked about, then do get in touch and you might have a job interview coming up. So just remember to reach out to a coach, and that 30 minutes of preparation could make all the difference. So again, thank you so much for your attendance today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.